Konnichiwa, and welcome to episode 46 of the Leadership Japan podcast. And I am your host in Tokyo, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Training Japan. And much more importantly, you are a student of leadership, highly motivated to be the best in your business field. If you would like your own access to 102 years of the accumulated wisdom of Dale Carnegie training through free white papers, guidebooks, reports, training videos, blogs, course information, plus much, much more, then go to japan.dalecarnegie.com. And today we are going to listen in to a talk on the Dale Carnegie brand.
Keep this brand 100 years young, current, and relevant to so many people. Greg is a 28-year veteran of Japan. He started on the academic field, and since then he expanded his career in a variety of fields, including consulting, trade representation, international diplomacy, retail banking, and people development. It is really for FCC to have a man of these diverse backgrounds to be the featured speaker of this evening. And he is scheduled to fly to Brisbane tomorrow to receive an award for his long-standing international contributions and distinguished career from his alma mater. And during his busy schedule, he managed to find the time to come to us to give us his insightful story. So please welcome Greg Story. And Greg, please give us your compelling story. Thank you.
So we just do a sound check. We sound like we're good. Thank you very much, Kay. And it's my second time actually to address the FCC. Last time I was here, I was representing the Shinsei Bank. And that was a challenger bank talking about how we're taking on the big boys and girls in the retail banking market. And today I'm going to talk about Dale Carnegie. And the brand we're talking about here is a 100-year-old brand. And it's had many, many trials and tribulations to get to this point in time. And it has succeeded, and there are some pretty clear reasons why it has succeeded. I'd like to talk about those tonight. But usually, most of the presentations we get at FCC, and I've been coming here since 2001 to FCC meetings, they're normally about product usually, so you actually see lots of product shots. Well, tonight, you'll see from the slides, it's all going to be about people. Everything you'll see tonight is basically going to be shots of people, because that is what we do. We are in the people development area. Dale Carnegie was in the people development area. So it's very much around those soft skills that we have. And I mentioned in the advertisement, I should say, for this, that one of our biggest fans is Warren Buffett. And I'm going to go to a couple of videos to talk about Warren Buffett, because as I mentioned, it's extraordinary to get someone of his fame and caliber to go out recommending your brand. And we could never afford to pay Warren Buffett. How much do you have to pay Warren Buffett to represent your brand? I mean, forget it. Who can afford Warren Buffett? Nobody. And the only brands he recommends are his own, that he actually Hathaway owns himself, except for Dale Carnegie. And we'll just hear a little bit from Warren tonight on why that actually is.
Persuasion. That's the next remarkable skill of Mr. Buffett, handling people.
My mom says when he was in his 20s, he was reasonably socially inept. I mean, like in large crowds, he'd much rather not be there, and he just would rather be reading and working on his stuff.
So Buffett learned how to deal with people from self-help guru Dale Carnegie.
I was terrified of public speaking when I was in high school and college. I couldn't do it. I mean, throw up and everything. So I took this Dale Carnegie course, and as soon as I finished it, I was 20 years old. I went out to the University of Omaha and I said, I want to start teaching because I wanted to get up in front of people and make sure I didn't lapse back.
Carnegie promised anyone could win friends and influence people if they did things like giving people aspirations to live up to instead of nagging them, and using their first name all the time.
I actually have the diploma in the office, and I don't have my diploma from college. I don't have my diploma from graduate school, but I've got my Dale Carnegie diploma there because it changed my life.
There's a critical phrase. It changed my life. And that is the power of this brand. And to have an advocate like this, and you talk about the diploma, well, let's have a look, see if we can find the diploma, because that's an interesting story too. Bring this up.
Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in the world. His company, Berkshire Hathaway, owns or has a stake in over 70 businesses, such as Coca-Cola, IBM, and American Express.
But this is no ordinary billionaire. He's giving 99% of his wealth to charity, and he thinks rich people should pay higher taxes.
Tonight, we'll see where Buffett's mega deals are done. His private office in Omaha, Nebraska. It is as unconventional as the man himself. What are the other photographs in this room that represent something important to you?
Well, they almost all represent something important. I mean, over here is my certificate from the Dale Carnegie course I took when I was 21. I was terrified of public speaking. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get in front of a crowd and give you my name. And finally I spent $100 and I took this course. And not only did I get so I could talk in front of people, you know, I can't stop talking in front of people. And during that class, I should mention, Charlie, I proposed to my wife during that. So if I didn't get my $100 worth from that class,
So, you know, you can imagine, he is well, the most successful investor in the world, going around on his own bat, talking about Dale Carnegie and the difference it made. That was one from the BBC, and then one recently this year in February from CBS. And so I've seen a number of these, obviously. Why is that? Why would he say that? It changed my life. Now that is a difficult proposition for any brand to be able to say that. Most of the things we use in our daily life, brands, don't change our life. And you see the certificate there in the number 8. That number 8 represents a prompt to me to remind myself there are 8 million fellow graduates, apart from Dale Carnegie, who've also had that big change in their life. So the brand for us lives in the person. It's not on a shelf or a display, it actually lives in the person. So it's quite unique, it's special. And we think about, as I said, yesterday was exactly the 100th anniversary of Dale Carnegie, starting 1912. Think about this. Dow Jones, 1912, has got a lot of companies listed. Today, how many of those companies do you think that were listed in 1912 are still on the Dow Jones now? Any ideas? Who thinks there's maybe 10? 10?
A couple.
10? Yeah. A couple? 1. General Electric.
No.
Lehman Brothers. Gone. Arthur Anderson. Gone. General Motors. Bankrupt. Kodak. Bankrupt. Yet here's one guy started on 125th Street in Harlem, in New York, the YMCA, teaching his one little course, one guy teaching one class. And yet, he's been able to take the company through 100 years of evolution. There's got to be something very fundamental about that that makes it work. And again, it comes back to that people component. This book, Topics for Talks and Schedule of Sessions, it says, effective speaking, personality development, and influencing men in business. That was an internal document that he'd worked on himself. The turning point, though, was this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936 by Simon & Schuster, which instantly became not just a bestseller in America, it became a global bestseller. It became a runaway success bestseller. And in the publishing world, there are two fantastic long sellers. When you think about it, most books don't sell for that long anymore. The turnover is quite high. You think about the business books you know, how many are actually a long seller? Not that many. The Bible is a fantastic long seller, and this is the other fantastic long seller, his book. Because you think about it, 1936 until now, it's still constantly, consistently finishing in the top 10 business books in virtually every language around the world, because it's become timeless and universal in this application. So this changed a lot for Dale Carnegie. And also the title, very interesting, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's kind of a bit of a cliche in English. It's almost like a parody at sometimes, you look at it. But the constant idea was, well, think about it. We all like to do business with people we like. That's fine. What makes you like them? Why would someone want to do business with you rather than somebody else? And this is a dilemma that Dale Carnegie found that people were facing. And he came up with some ideas. You've all distributed the golden books with these principles in there. They were developed to help people become better with other people. And the book is basically the explanation of all those principles. The other part is about influencing people. Well, we want to be persuasive. We want people to buy our product, idea, concept, direction, whatever we're advocating. And he found ways to help people to become more persuasive. That's why it still resonates. When you read the book in English, it's still very quaint. And most of the examples he is giving, those companies are no longer there and those people have already passed on. But there's something charming about the freshness still of what he's written that lasts. And this really, in 38 was translated into Japanese. It's become a bestseller of 9 million copies of this book have sold in Japan. That's a phenomenal amount of copies of people who've had this. And for Japanese business people, they say to me the two Bibles in Japan, Drucker on management and Carnegie on people skills. And that is a very consistent thing I hear from senior Japanese business people who've been very successful. So, superstar status overnight. One moment, he's like a J.K. Rowling, writing a novel on the kitchen table at home. And the next minute, boom, she's instantly well-known all around the world. Same thing, but on a much bigger scale, because in those days, there weren't the mega superstars in volume like we have today, because you think of the media expansion today. Back then, if you're on national broadcast, NBC, that is a big, big deal, because very, very few people are doing that. And he was such a star that he could pull that type of audience. And this is Carnegie Hall. Have a careful look at this. This is the photographer couldn't fit the whole thing into the shot. So this is only one half of Carnegie Hall. And they're packed up, I don't know how many floors this thing goes to, but they're packed to the rafters, as we say, as an idiom in English. They're packed to the top. And that's to hear him speak. It was that type of superstar status that he had instantly attracted. And this is in Buenos Aires. 500 people to a public preview. We run public previews today. Trust me, I'd love to have 500 people come to a public preview for Dale Carnegie. But back then, that was the sort of audience that they could pull. This is no Dale Carnegie there. This is the people running the Dale Carnegie training in South America, in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, who are attracting 500 people to come and hear about his principles and how it works. So phenomenal take-up. Everywhere he went, this is actually on a ship, he's on a cruise, can't escape, he's got to talk. So he's a guy who, like a lot of people, spent a long time becoming an overnight success. From 1912 to 1936, he was not nationally known. He was known in the training world, he was known in the business world as a trainer, personally taught 5,000 classes, but he was not a brand name. And then he came out with this book a little bit later. Because what he discovered was, I'm teaching people really grow their confidence, grow their leadership skills, grow their communication skills, grow their people skills. But when they're under a lot of tension and stress, it's all starting to break down. And it's a very sad comment that 100 years ago, the problem he's facing and the problem we're facing today around stress and depression, etc., is not that different. 100 years ago, if you had minor amounts of stress, you just persevered and carried on. If you got really highly stressed and you became sick, then you went to hospital or possibly an institution. 100 years later, what happens? If we have minor levels of stress, you just carry on. If you have higher levels of stress, you get pharmaceuticals. But then and now, there's not much in between. This was a book written for the in-between. So you could self-medicate in a way through taking different principles that he devised by talking to people about how they dealt with stress, putting them into a book to help us control ourselves before we get to a state where we need pharmaceuticals or hospitalization. And then this book, again, became very, very powerful in building his brand. And so this is the Japanese version, Michiwa Hirakiru, also great bestseller. And this country certainly needs some help in the stress relief department. In fact, we have some representatives from the Acumen organisation who published the British Chamber Journal. In the next online bulletin, e-bulletin, I've written an article on stress management, and it's referring to some of the principles in this book, because and I start talking about, if you've ever been standing on a platform in the morning wondering why your train is late, there's a reason for that. Someone's killed themselves on the train track. And there's basically 3 suicides a day going on in Japan. So there's a lot of help needed. So this is not necessarily an idea that we've actually fixed. So Dale Carnegie grew up, classic, in Missouri, and Will's from Missouri, right? And he grew up poor. He grew up in a very poor farming family, the classic rags to riches American dream success story. And then his book's now being published in Japan in different volumes. This is the latest book, just come out recently. The Japanese version of this book will be released next month, called Hito Gakasu 2. And so in English, it was How to Influence People in the Digital Age, which is trying to take what he was talking about and take it to this current era and the sort of different interactions that we face. So Dale Carnegie passes away in 1955. Now, if your brand is built around one man, what do you do when the one man's gone? And there's no successor to the brand name because his daughter was only a child, a young child, 2 or 3, maybe 4 years old when he passed away. And because it was a licensed business where people around the world would have the Dale Carnegie license, they called them sponsors in those days, and they would run the business. There was no natural successor to Dale Carnegie. So the likelihood was it was going to end right there. That would be the end of it. Except for a very powerful and important person, his wife, Dorothy. Now, Dorothy was his secretary, and she became Mrs. Carnegie. And on his passing, into her office came some of the more senior guys in the organisation who had their own licensed areas. They were running the Dale Carnegie training business there. Go back to 1955. I mean, today we can hardly believe it, but in 1955, no one thought that a woman could run a company. I used to watch some episodes of that TV series Mad Men, set in the 50s, and I remember an episode, there's a particular episode where, same thing, the woman was the daughter of the father who started the company, and they rejected her ideas because she was a woman. And when you look at it, you laugh because it's so ludicrous. But back in 55, that was reality. Now, Dorothy was a very strong person. She kicked those guys out of her office, said thank you very much, and she went out and she hired clever people. She hired experts in different areas to work for her. And the difference between Dorothy and Dale Carnegie was not a particularly business-oriented guy. He was an artist. He loved training people. He personally taught more than 5,000 classes. Think about that. He developed this idea and he pioneered it and he saw it grow and he saw it grow immensely in North America, particularly in South America. And he loved the art. He loved what it did because he could see people growing. He could see it changing their lives in front of his very eyes. And I don't know if there's any engineers in the room. Any reformed engineers or engineers in this room? Pretty hard to pull an engineer in an FCC meeting. Oh, we've got one over here, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, son, thank you. He loved training engineers. Why? Because they're so hopeless. They were absolutely hopeless in people skills, in communication. They were smart people, they were technical people, they were very, very good in their field on their own. But when they got promoted, they had to deal with managing people, they couldn't do it. They came in droves to his training because they discovered they had a facility lack that he could fill. And so he was the artist. And he liked engineers particularly because in one series of sessions, he could just see like bamboo growing, getting better and better every week. So Dorothy is really, she is the soul of the international network. Now there are 298 offices in 86 countries around the world. Now just think about those numbers, 298 offices in 86 countries around the world. This is a multinational company of very big proportions. How many multinationals do you know that have got 298 operations on the ground in 86 countries? Not so many. Now we don't think of Dale Carnegie as a multinational, but it is a massive multinational by any comparison. And 90% of the Fortune 500 companies are using this training. Now, if it didn't work, trust me, they wouldn't be using it. And if it wasn't current, trust me, they wouldn't be using it. And you don't get the most powerful corporations in America adopting this training unless they see a return on investment, an ROI in this. And so he founded something in 1912, which I doubt he could have imagined would be at the stage where it is today. I don't think he could have imagined 86 countries. He probably didn't think about 86 countries. He probably thought more in terms of the soul of what he was teaching. Before he passed away, 2 years before he passed away, Harry O'Han was one of his early trainers and disciples. And in fact, he's so unbusinesslike. Can you imagine this? He gave half of America to one guy. Half of America. He said, there's the line down the middle. Harry, that's yours. Take care of it for me, please. Just before he died, he visited Harry O'Han in Los Angeles. And he said, he knew time was coming up for him. And he said, Harry, keep my dream alive. Because he knew he wasn't going to be around. That's the artist, not the businessman. But today, thanks to Dorothy, it's become a global operation. And that global strength is very important. We talk about the brand. The brand is whatever it is in that country. The brand is whatever it is in that culture. The brand is whatever it is in that language. The brand is whatever it is in the delivery. And so when we get to convention every year, it's a massive UN-style operation. People all around the world, all of that expertise, all of that exposure coming together in the one place, refreshing the brand constantly. We are ISO 9001 certified, which is very strict in terms of what they expect us to keep doing, in terms of polishing our delivery component, which is the training. And so Mr. Crom here in the middle was a previous president of Dale Carnegie, part of the family from Dale Carnegie's previous marriage. And so it is very much a family business as well. And I'll give you a little episode. My first opportunity to go to convention was to Miami 2 years ago. So I don't know anything. I've just, I bought the company, but I didn't work in the company the first couple of years because I was running the National Australia Bank. And then I got a chance to come into the company. I go to the first convention. I'm the new boy. I don't know anybody. And I'm at one of the functions, and I'm chatting with Dorothy Dale Carnegie, the daughter. Like, what an honor, And she's chatting with this guy, and he's got a moustache, and he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He's got long hair and a ponytail. I think, this guy doesn't quite look Dale Carnegie to me, But she's very friendly with him. And then I was talking to him later, and I found out that he actually is the guy that organises the convention. So all the cameras and the sound gear and all the sort of backstage stuff, his company does that. They've been doing it forever. And he said, I really like your organisation. I do this every year. I don't make any money out of it. It's always the last job in the year, but I always like to come because you people really walk the talk. I'm thinking, what's he talking about? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, look, you guys actually follow the principles, You actually do what you say you should do. I thought, yeah, well, what do you mean? So, well, you know, I do this for a living, so I'm going to conventions all over the place. The top motivational speakers are my clientele. I'm organising their events for them. I'm on the headset. I'm backstage. I hear everything. I see everything. And I see what's being delivered out front, but I also hear what's going on, and I see what's being delivered out the back. And a lot of times, it isn't the same thing. So what I like about your organisation is it is always the same thing. And that is the brand, the purity of the brand. Keep my dream alive. Change people's lives. That is why the brand works. And that's why came to Japan was a success as well. Dale Carnegie was actually in Japan 3 times. Came here twice in 1939. He was a guest of the Japanese government. And he travelled from Japan through to Korea and up into China and came back again and then went back to the States. And he came back in 1953. When he was here in 1939, he visited a number of places. He went to Gifu. And you might know that in Gifu they have a very famous cormorant fishing festival. It's quite a tourist attraction. It was a tourist attraction then. It's a tourist attraction now. And he stayed at the Nagara-gawa Hotel in Gifu. And there was a gentleman working there by the name of Mochizuki. And he was just working in the hotel. And he was given a book. He was actually given this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Now, 39, right? A couple of years later, Mochizuki's in a uniform. I don't quite know where he was. But interestingly, he said, I had that book with me all through the war. Because it meant so much to me that here was a guy who could see beyond statesmen and diplomats to a different world where people could get on. He was conscripted into the army, he didn't have a choice, but he saw a different world. And after the war in '52, he went to the States and he studied hotel management. He wound up in the Hilton Hotel Group. And he noticed, wow, these Hilton people are really good with people. They're fantastic with the staff. They're great with the guests. And they're really good in presentation skills. How's this happening? And they said, well, we did the Dale Carnegie course. So he took it in English. And he was amazed. He thought, wow, this is incredible. So he comes back to Japan in '59. And he's thinking, you know, I've got to bring this to Japan. We've got to help people here in Japan too. Rebuild the country, you know, it's after the war. And it took him a little while to organise that, but finally he did organise it. And in 1963, the first class was launched. The licence was given in '62, but the first class was January 1963. It's an article from the Japan Times. Actually, the article is in 1964, but it's referring to 1963. And then there's another article here in '67, and I like this because it's talking about Father Boulogne from Sophia University, who was teaching management in those days. And when I came here in 1979, first time in Japan, one of my teachers was Father Boulogne. And I did a master's degree eventually at Georgie, and he was one of the professors. He's still there, so I felt, oh, I'm connected a little bit here. And then here we have this great photograph in 1970. That's Mr. Mochizuki there in the middle holding the sign. And Fumi, his wife, is sitting next to him. She was also involved in the business. And a lot of the gentlemen who were in this photograph were the presidents of gaishikei companies, foreign companies in Japan, such as Bank of America, such as Warner Brothers. And they spoke English. And they were very international. And they loved it. They thought this is fantastic. Now, can you imagine, the president of Bank of America is your trainer? How phenomenal is that? That's brand. That is brand, because the delivery is everything. The person is everything. And so Mochizuki was a genius at getting these very elite people in Japanese society to become brand representatives for Dale Carnegie training and also be the deliverers. Now, just the gentleman on the far right, your far right, just cutting off there a little bit, Mr. Yamamoto, he actually was a brilliant, brilliant student and was actually the guy to take over from Mochizuki, who very unfortunately, only a few months into it, passed away unexpectedly. And his wife had to take it over and continue. And then I took it over from her. But, you know, this group are very interesting. Here they are here. Many of the people in that first photograph in 1970 are now in their 70s and 80s and still part of the Dale Carnegie family, because it is still a family feel to it. It's a mission. It's a it's a cause, it's not a cult or a religion, but it's dynamic, and you see the change, you see the helping of people. It gets into people's systems, they still want to stay a part of it. And so we had a function last year, and we had a lot of people come. Warren Buffett, of course, is an icon in the Western culture. There are a few icons in the Japanese culture too. Mr. Atarashi, very well-known businessman, big fan of Dale Carnegie. And when he was President, Johnson & Johnson brought Dale Carnegie into there. Mr. Otani, Coca-Cola, we're still doing training for Coca-Cola. Big fan in his speeches and his writing. And Mr. Murakami, ex-chairman of Google, again, big fan. He writes about Dale Carnegie. He has this really old, archaic-looking golden book that you've got with him. He still reads it every day. It changed their lives. It changed their careers. That is the brand. It took them to a high level. They, amongst all their peers, went up. They went to the very top. And in fact, we're having a function on the 30th of November to celebrate the 100th year, and you're most welcome if you'd like to come. It's on our website. Murakami-san will be the guest speaker at that event because he feels he still wants to be part of the Dale Carnegie family.